No, the question was like, do you think logical contradictions or dialetheism and classical theism can go hand in hand?
Well, I think it's like, I think for us, in the way that we interpret things, it would come off like a logical contradiction, but in God's perspective, it would not be. Like, Muslims and a lot of other people, they would say that the Trinity is illogical in the way that they're seeing it, but then from our perspective, it wouldn't be.
What denomination are you?
I'm not any branch at the moment. I'm just Christian.
Who told you that dialetheism and classical theism go hand in hand?
Oh no one told me that. Today I just learned the word of dialetheism, but I knew of the concept before, and I was already like thinking about the concept. It reminded me of something that my dad would tell me, which he'd ask me if Pinocchio says my nose will grow, will his nose grow?
You don't have to accept dialetheism there. You can accept like some sort of paraconsistent logic. You don't have to accept dialetheism. Anyways, I have to go.
We're going to talk about logic and God, so that'll be interesting.
But what was the essence? Where did the original question emanate from? Like,
it was from a video that I made about if God can create a rock so heavy that he can't lift.
Oh, that one, the one I replied to last time. Yeah, I see.
You know what the answer is to that question? It's a logical question, so the question by itself is faulty.
A lot of Christians were telling me that, and I rejected it, and a lot of their responses, I rejected it, but then I started thinking about a different way to go about it, and then there's one comment that shifted my mind, so now I actually disagree with what I said, but now my new conclusion, I still think Christians wouldn't like it, so I'm curious about what Christians would think.
What helped me kind of make it make sense is like, you cannot have a, let's say, square circle, right? It's because, by definition, a square has 4 sides and a circle only 1. So it's less of God can do anything, so why can't he do this? It's more of a definition thing. So if you had a square circle, that is no longer a square circle, that's something new, right? So but with the same standard, like, that square circle question is illogical, doesn't make sense. So it's not really got you. God isn't all powerful. It's more like your question is just illogical, doesn't make sense.
Even technically speaking, if God cannot fulfill like a request that is illogical, that itself means there is limit to what he can do. But I don't think most Christians really, I don't think they have a problem with conceiving or admitting that God is not necessarily all powerful. Like, it's not necessarily contradictory to their value system, or to what they preach.
You know what the thing is? God cannot do everything. People assume that God can do everything. It's like saying, can God turn himself into a piece of shit that I step on in the street? That by itself is like, God would never do that, right? So does that mean God is not all powerful? No, God is still all powerful, but there's just some things that's not in his nature to do. So that's like when you get questions like that, like, can God do this? Can God do that? That's kind of like the logic behind it. Like, God has his nature and his will. So there's some things that fall outside of that.
If someone won't do something because it is not in their will to do it, another way of looking at it is that they can't do it. And the reason they can't do it is because of the state and quality of their mind preventing them to do so. You might say that dodges the definitional difference between can't and won't, but I think it applies. It applies here. If God will not do something simply because he does not want to, and he never will want to, then in a sense, it's as if he can't, simply because his mind is made up. And I mean, I can't imagine a person has external control over their own mind. But that's another topic.
It's like asking, like, can God send all disbelievers to heaven, even if they've committed the worst of sins? Like, there's a point in hell being there, right? And some people, they get sent to the hellfire. So is God not all powerful because he doesn't want to send some people to heaven even if they don't deserve to be there. There's like so many different ways to look at this. It's like it's kind of interesting the more you think about it.
I think you brought a good point with the difference between power and ability. So something that I also kind of realized is that that having the ability to do everything is not the same as being all powerful. Yeah, there was one person that said, not lifting a rock isn't powerful, thus not lifting it can't be a lack of power. So I thought that was also a good point. And then Eric's comment too, when he was gone, someone was talking and it reminded me of his comment, saying that God can do all that he desires. He can create an entire new dimension if he desires, or he cannot lift it in that one, but allow himself everywhere to lift it nonetheless. Just to prove that he is God, he would entirely create a new dimension just to provide our request.
That is correct.
I would disagree with that, but I'm not going to comment on it.
I was reading your comment.
I would agree on.
If you accept divine simplicity, which in short, the thesis of divine simplicity is that everything intrinsic to God is identical to God. For example, all knowledge, omniscience, which is intrinsic to God, would be identical to God. So we say that God deliberates between choosing and not choosing. Choosing and not choosing to maybe create the earth 1 mile more in circumference or whatever, right? We wouldn't say that he deliberates between these two possible choices. There's certain choices that he could have actualized, meaning that there's potency in him, meaning he could have been otherwise. His knowledge could have been otherwise, right? But we're saying that everything which he actualizes is going to be necessary, intrinsic to him. But obviously, like what he brings about is going to be contingent.
That's a good point. The conclusion that I ended up making is that God cannot make a rock so powerful that he can't lift, but he chooses not to in the form of Jesus. But then with that line of reasoning, I would also reject things like saying Mary is the mother of God. And so then that's the part where now Christians are going to not like that I said that, but now that's what I'm thinking. Jesus is eternal and he can lift the rock, but he just chooses not to. But then I also question if he can't in his human form still. So there's still one question I have about it, but yeah.
Oh yeah, he can't in his human form. That's fine. Well, we would say the person of Jesus can't according to the human nature. This is
yeah.
I forgot who coined it, but it's called the communicatio idiomatum, the communication of operations or properties. I forget what it translates to. I think it's operations, and it's in order to combat Nestorianism. Nestorianism split the persons or the natures of Christ and said there's two sons. There's Jesus, the human, and then there's Jesus, the divine person. He said there's two persons. Now we use the communicatio idiomatum in order to predicate, humanly things to Jesus, the divine person, without splitting the nature. So we can say Jesus suffered according to the human nature, and then Jesus is omnipotent according to the divine nature, without there being a contradiction. There's no contradiction because there's two different senses, or two different respects in which this obtains. I think another way to understand the omnipotence paradox is with something simpler. We can, for example, say it is logically possible to learn something. God can't learn, given that he's omniscient, so there's nothing for him to learn. Does that mean that, now God is lacking in power? No, it doesn't mean that. It simply means that if a God who is all-knowing, can't learn something because he knows everything, it just means that this logical possibility has to be indexed to a certain subject. So we say that's indexed to the person of God. This is not a logical possibility. It's not something that terminates. It's not something that ever obtains. Now, indexed to a human can obviously learn because they're not omniscient. So we would say this does obtain. Now, can a rock that God can't lift ever obtain? No, right? So it's not a thing that can ever come to existence. It's not a thing. You can think of it conceptually, but it's not something that would ever exist in reality. Meaning it's not something that can be brought into fruition.
Yeah, I understood most of that. And that's the thing too. That's what I was saying earlier. Is what I realized is that there's a difference between having the ability to do things and then having power. So being able and then being all powerful. Because if God had the ability to learn, then that just shows that he's lacking the power in the sense of that he doesn't know all things. If he has the ability to learn, then that actually undermines his power.
For example, like this can be applied to every single property of God. You can say it's logically possible for a being to derive its being from another being, meaning it's dependent on something else for it to exist. What do we say that, since this is a logical possibility, God should be able to do it? No, because by definition, God is self-subsistent. He is self-existing. This is a logical possibility, yet it's not something that would terminate index to God.
Here's an interesting question to think about. It's about like the whole all-powerful thing, right? If God is all-powerful, can he make himself depend on my existence?
Yeah, no.
No. When we talk about possibilities, there's different modalities, right? There's nomological possibility, there's a metaphysical possibility, and then there's logical possibility. I think there's another one in between nomological and metaphysical. I forgot what it is. Nomological would just be what's possible given the natural laws. Metaphysical possibility is just like what can obtain metaphysically.
Yeah,
Without
let me be more specific. So the second I die, God stops existing, basically. And this basically just ties back to what I said earlier about like the question itself can be illogical, right? Because God has the attribute of being all powerful, but he's also not dependent on anything besides himself. So when you ask a question like that, it's just like invalid, basically. That's like what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it is invalid. That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just simply because this is a state of affairs that will never obtain. Like it's not. If we take logical possibility, which encompasses a lot, like we could say it's logically possible for, for Looney Tunes to be reality. Like that's something that would follow in philosophy. Like if you study philosophy, if you say it's logically possible that we live in the show of Looney Tunes, like you can't, like you would agree with that because it poses something is logically possible if it doesn't violate any laws of logic, or if it's not illogical, basically. So that could be something that's logically possible. And I'm saying that this state of affairs would not ever terminate in a logical possibility.
I didn't agree that it was invalid until I started thinking about the nature of Jesus. Like I brought up earlier, just like the phrase of Mary being the mother of God. That's something all Catholics believe, and even Protestant denominations all believe that Mary is the mother of God. Because they say, well, Mary is the mother of Jesus, Jesus is God, so that means Mary is the mother of God. So if Jesus can't lift a rock, but because he's limited, but he's God, then that means that God can't lift a rock. So that's kind of where I was going with it. Because Mary's the mother of Jesus in his human form, but Mary is not the mother of the Father. But Jesus is God and the Father is God both equally and fully, so then that would mean that Mary is and is not the mother of God at the same time, which is kind of where I was going with it.
You know what it makes me think about? It's like you know how some women they choose to let another woman like carry their child.
Oh yeah, surrogacy.
Yeah. So who is technically the mother there? Like it's kind of like just because she carried the child doesn't mean that she's the mother. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because some women they have like the egg, which is the like hers. So the egg is hers, and then the basically the sperm that fertilized the egg is her, let's say her husband's, and then they choose to put that egg in another woman because she doesn't want to go through like pregnancy, right? Is the woman that's carrying the baby the mother? Because this happens in real life. People can pay to have other people carry the baby for them.
Yeah, I had a long conversation about surrogacy before. There's two kinds. One of them is when the surrogate mother takes her own egg, and then there's the other one where it takes another woman's egg. So sometimes there's the mother that's the egg, there's the mother that carries the child, and then there's the mother that raises the child, which I think is just messed up. The child's like asking, well, like who's actually my mom?
In which way do Catholics refer to Mary as the mother?
I think they would refer to Mary as, because Catholics, they believe that Jesus has like two natures and two wills. So they have like his human will and then his like divine will. But because Jesus is still fully God, then they would say that Mary is still like fully his mother. But yeah, so yeah, I don't know if that answered it.
So do they believe like Jesus has Mary's DNA, like 50%?
I would think so. Yeah.
Yes, he had.
I think that yes, he's biologically, and especially if they also believe in the Immaculate Conception, so they believe that Mary was sinless in a sense as well, because God saved her from sin, and that was necessary because Jesus came from her flesh, so she also had to be sinless.
That's interesting. I need to think about that more.
Yeah, and in Islam too, don't they also think that Mary is sinless?
I think so, yeah.
And that Jesus didn't have a father?
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. It's a bit complicated. They have their own weird thing.
They do believe that she gave birth to Jesus, but I don't think they believe that she's like. I don't know. I don't remember if being sinless is only reserved to like prophets. Actually, that's a good question. I'm gonna have to look into that. I don't remember.
Yeah, because I did hear that they also believe that Mary is sinless, but I don't know for sure. But that is what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I would have to look into that. I literally forgot that one.
I also learned recently that because there's different sects of Orthodox as well. So Eastern Orthodox do believe that Jesus has two natures and two wills, but then the Armenian Church and Ethiopian Church, which were like some of the first Christian countries, they fall into Oriental Orthodox, and so they believe that Jesus has one will and one nature. So I think with that line of thinking, I would be hesitant to say that Mary is the mother of God.
You know what makes me lose faith in humanity? There's been people, just think about this, yeah. There's been people that have seen miracles with their own eyes happen in front of them by prophets of God, and they still chose to not believe them.
Mm-hmm. True.
That's true.
That is crazy to think about. There's people that saw Moses split the sea and were like, no, he's just a magician. That makes you think about, like, because people are still like the same nowadays, you know? It's like, kind of makes you think.
Yeah.
See things a bit differently.
Especially if people are demanding more proof, or they want like more evidence, more proof or something, but even if all of it was right in front of them, most people still wouldn't accept it.
Yeah, I think in the Quran or in the Hadith it says something like that like the disbelievers, even if God came down himself and presented himself in front of them, they would still not believe.
Facts. I believe that's what happened too.
That's true.
But yeah,
it's crazy to think about how. I mean, that's the whole point of like us being on Earth and being human, right?
mm-hmm.
So I guess it makes sense.